Other people haven't noticed it, but it's really my.
It was almost too surreal to believe. Just one day after Carrie Fisher passed away, her mother, the legendary Debbie Reynolds, suffered a stroke and died. Her final words to her son Todd were quiet but piercing. "I want to be with Carrie." In a town built on illusions and silver screens, this real-life tragedy stunned even the most hardened hearts in Hollywood. How could two of the most iconic women in show business, mother and daughter, vanish within 24 hours of each other? But their story didn't begin with their deaths. It began decades earlier, in the golden age of Hollywood, in a world of camera flashes, broken marriages, and children born into fame before they ever had a choice. This is the story of Carrie Fisher, the voice of a generation, and the two people who shaped her life in both joy and ruin: her father, Eddie Fisher, and her mother, Debbie Reynolds. Let us begin. Carrie Frances Fisher wasn't just born. She arrived, like a flash bulb in a dark room, in the very heart of Hollywood. Born on October 21, 1956, in Burbank, California, she came into the world with star power already pulsing through her veins. Her mother, Debbie Reynolds, was America's sweetheart, a luminous actress who had danced alongside Gene Kelly in Singin' in the Rain. Her father, Eddie Fisher, was one of the most beloved crooners of the 1950s. The press called them Hollywood royalty. But that royal castle didn't last long. By the time Carrie was 2, her parents' marriage had exploded in the most public way possible. Eddie Fisher left Debbie for none other than Elizabeth Taylor, Debbie's close friend, igniting a media scandal so loud it seemed to echo through Carrie's childhood. From an early age, she learned that fame could be cruel and family unstable. While other little girls played with dolls, Carrie played backstage. Her mother's movie sets became her playground. But even amid sequins and spotlight, she never quite fit the script of a classic Hollywood princess. She was introspective, sharp-tongued, and often drowning in thoughts too deep for her age. Acting came naturally to her. She made her Broadway debut at 15. But writing? Writing became her weapon, her mirror, and her salvation. In 1977, Star Wars changed everything. As Princess Leia Organa, she became an instant icon, bold, witty, unforgettable. But behind the iconic buns and blaster was a woman unraveling. Carrie wrestled silently with bipolar disorder, substance abuse, and a lifelong fear of being eclipsed by her mother's fame, by the industry's cruelty, by her own mind. Yet she refused to be swallowed by any of it. She fought back, not just with rehab and therapy, but with blisteringly honest books. Postcards from the Edge, wishful drinking, and her brutally raw interviews turned her into a new kind of star, one who didn't pretend. She called out the hypocrisy of Hollywood, laughed at her own pain, and let millions know they weren't alone. Carrie Fisher wasn't just the daughter of stars. She became one, but not by being perfect. She shined because she was broken and made art out of it. Still, for all her wit and courage, a part of her remained that little girl, watching her parents fall apart on the front page, wondering if love ever really lasted. And that ache never truly left. She was known as the girl with the sparkling smile and a voice that could brighten the darkest screen. Debbie Reynolds was born Mary Frances Reynolds on April 1, 1932 in El Paso, Texas, a Depression-era child who would one day become one of Hollywood's most cherished stars. With grit talent, and undeniable charm, she rose from obscurity to become the quintessential American sweetheart of the 1950s. At just 19, she stunned audiences alongside Gene Kelly in Singing in the Rain. From that moment, Debbie was adored. Elegant, witty, wholesome. But the real Debbie was more complex than the studio portraits suggested. She was sharp, ambitious, and deeply traditional. She believed in loyalty, hard work, and above all, family. That's why, when Eddie Fisher betrayed her and their family, the wound went deeper than headlines could reach. The betrayal was biblical. Eddie, her husband and the father of her 2 children, fell in love with Debbie's close friend Elizabeth Taylor. The scandal was merciless, splashed across every magazine. Debbie was left not only as a single mother of 2 toddlers, but also as a public symbol of heartbreak. She never lashed out, never played the victim. She smiled through it, because that's what showgirls did. And behind that smile, she rebuilt her life, one performance at a time. Raising Carrie and Todd alone, Debbie juggled her career with motherhood, but not always gracefully. She was on the road constantly, performing in nightclubs, starring in films, working to keep her children in comfort. Carrie grew up in hotels and dressing rooms, learning to apply mascara while her mother rehearsed show tunes. But even with all the glitter, there was distance. Debbie wanted perfection, and Carrie was chaos. Debbie was old Hollywood, elegant and reserved. Carrie was sharp-edged and brutally honest. As Carrie entered adulthood, their differences clashed. Carrie resented being expected to perform femininity, to smile for the cameras, to be Debbie's daughter first and herself second. At times, their relationship collapsed into silence. Carrie once said, "We had a fairly volatile relationship earlier on, but it turned into a very strong bond later on." Despite everything, there was love. Fierce, flawed, and undeniable. In later years, mother and daughter found a rare harmony. They moved into neighboring houses in Beverly Hills. They spoke daily, often arguing, but always reconnecting. They began to laugh about the past, even as it haunted them. Their final act together wasn't a film or a show, it was life itself. In 2016, just months before their deaths, they starred in the HBO documentary Bright Lights, starring Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, a raw, intimate look at their complex relationship. In one scene, Debbie watches Singin' in the Rain from her couch, her face glowing with nostalgia. Carrie, watching her mother watch herself, is quiet, her eyes full. There's no script here, no performance, just 2 women, mother and daughter, bound by history and pain and an odd, unbreakable love. Carrie once described her mother as the iron butterfly, delicate on the outside, indestructible within. And perhaps that was true. Debbie had endured public shame, financial ruin, 3 failed marriages, and the ups and downs of fame, and yet she never stopped. She kept performing, kept showing up, kept loving in the only way she knew. But as Carrie's health declined, so did Debbie's strength. In her final days, friends said she seemed distracted, worried, fragile. She told Todd, her son, "I miss Carrie. I want to see her again." Less than 24 hours after Carrie passed away, Debbie followed her. It wasn't a coincidence. It was love, in its most eternal, painful, and beautiful form. December 23, 2016. A quiet morning at Heathrow Airport turned into a tragic chapter in Hollywood history. Among the passengers boarding a flight to Los Angeles was Carrie Fisher, novelist, script doctor, speaker, icon. She had just wrapped up a whirlwind promotional tour in London for her memoir, The Princess Diarist. It was her rawest book yet, revisiting her youth on the set of Star Wars and the secret affairs she'd had with Harrison Ford. Carrie had been radiant, funny, and as sharp as ever. No one imagined this flight would be her last. Midway over the Atlantic, Carrie fell unconscious. According to eyewitnesses, she had been speaking with fellow passengers, laughing even, and then she slumped. A nearby nurse immediately began CPR. Panic rippled through first class. Flight attendants scrambled. For 10 long minutes, the woman who had battled inner storms with brutal honesty was unresponsive. The crew radioed ahead, requesting an emergency landing. At LAX, paramedics met the plane on the tarmac and rushed her to UCLA Medical Center. She was placed in the intensive care unit and remained there unresponsive for 4 days. On December 27, 2016, Carrie Fisher passed away at the age of 60. The world gasped. Within minutes, social media flooded with tributes. Some mourned Princess Leia, the fierce feminist rebel who had stood tall in a galaxy ruled by men. Others mourned the truth teller, the woman who had made it okay to talk about mental illness, to say, "I'm bipolar," without shame. Her daughter, Billie Lourd, released a short statement. She was loved by the world, and she will be missed profoundly. The official cause of death, according to the Los Angeles County coroner, was sleep apnea and other undetermined factors. But the toxicology report revealed traces of cocaine, heroin, MDMA, methadone, and alcohol in her system. It was impossible to say exactly when those substances were used. Still, the findings reopened a conversation Carrie had never shied away from. She had spoken candidly for years about her battles with substance abuse and mental health. In Wishful Drinking, she wrote, "One of the side effects of recovery is that you get your sense of humor back. Of course, mine never left." But her journey was never linear. Rehab, relapse, recovery, rinse and repeat. Even as she aged, the ghosts never fully disappeared. What made her death so painful wasn't just that it came suddenly, but that she had been fighting so hard. Her work had never been more fearless, her voice never more necessary. Carrie had transformed pain into poetry, illness into insight. She was helping others survive by telling the story of how she almost didn't. And yet, the heart that had carried so many burdens for so long gave out. At the hospital, Billie held her hand. Friends came and went in silence. Debbie Reynolds, her mother, waited just a few miles away. Frail, quiet, and inconsolable. The woman who had once shone under Technicolor lights now sat in a small room watching everything crumble. Debbie had lived through betrayals, bankruptcies, and the collapse of Hollywood's golden age. But nothing could prepare her for this. As news cameras camped outside their homes, inside, something ancient and unspeakable was unfolding. The news had barely settled. Fans were still lighting candles for Carrie Fisher when, just 1 day later, another announcement shattered the world's breath. Debbie Reynolds, her mother, had died too. On December 28, 2016, merely 24 hours after her daughter's passing, Debbie suffered a severe stroke while discussing funeral plans. Her final words, whispered to her son Todd Fisher, were heartbreakingly simple: "I want to be with Carrie." It was not just loss. It was legend, a love story between mother and daughter that had survived betrayal, stardom, addiction, and silence. And now, somehow, even death could not separate them. The double tragedy sent ripples across Hollywood and far beyond. Two icons, two generations, extinguished in the span of a single breath. The public had followed their lives for decades, but never imagined witnessing the end. So sudden, so close, so poetic. Their joint funeral was held on January 6, 2017, at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles, the same resting place as Michael Jackson, Elizabeth Taylor, and Betty Davis. Only close friends and family were present. Billie Lourd, Carrie's daughter, remained mostly silent in public, choosing instead to grieve in private. But inside, she was the keeper of two legacies and two heartbreaks. A white hearse carried Debbie's casket, while Carrie's ashes arrived in an urn shaped like a giant Prozac pill, chosen by her brother Todd in honor of Carrie's unfiltered humor and lifelong battle with mental illness. It was morbid, it was bizarre, and it was perfectly, painfully Carrie. Inside the memorial hall, there was no spectacle, no red carpet, just stillness. Photos of the two women, at premieres, on sets, in gardens, in old family kitchens, lined the walls. Barbra Streisand sent a note. Meryl Streep, one of Carrie's closest friends, sang "Happy Days Are Here Again" through tears. A slideshow played, with their voices echoing behind it. Mother and daughter, arguing, laughing, forgiving. Todd Fisher stood to speak. His voice broke often. He said, "My girls are together. They always were, even when they weren't." The press stayed outside, held back by iron gates and the knowledge that this grief was not for cameras. Fans gathered on the nearby sidewalk, many holding flowers, Leia posters, or simply weeping. The contrast was striking. Two of the most famous women in the world, who had lived under constant spotlight, now lay at peace, surrounded by silence. Their last performance was not for applause, it was for each other. Debbie had always been the professional. The smile never cracked, but when Carrie's heart stopped, so did hers. It wasn't a medical coincidence. It was emotional surrender. Some called it broken heart syndrome. Others said it was destiny. In the end, Debbie kept her promise. She went to be with her daughter. Not on stage, not on screen, but in eternity. As the last note of the piano faded and the final photo of them together dissolved on the screen, there was only one feeling that remained in the room. Awe. Not just for the stars they had been, but for the love they never stopped chasing and never stopped giving. In the days that followed the double tragedy, something extraordinary began to unfold. What had once been a family shaped by chaos and contradiction now became a symbol of unbreakable love. Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, in death as in life, stood for something larger than fame. They stood for resilience, reconciliation, and the complex power of mother-daughter bonds. For Billie Lourd, the grief was immeasurable. At just 24, she had lost her mother and grandmother within 48 hours. But Billie didn't retreat. In quiet dignity, she honored their legacies, first by continuing her own acting career, and later through interviews where she spoke candidly about grief, mental illness, and generational healing. She once said, "They were the brightest, most incredible women I'll ever know. And the best part is they knew I loved them." The cultural impact rippled outward. Tributes poured in, not just from Hollywood, but from fans who had struggled with their own demons: bipolar disorder, addiction, generational trauma. Carrie's raw openness about her mental health became more powerful in death than even during her lifetime. Memes of her wisdom spread across the internet. Quotes like, "Take your broken heart, make it into art," became digital mantras. Meanwhile, Debbie was remembered not just as an entertainer, but as a pillar of old Hollywood who never lost her grace, even when the world broke her heart. Retrospectives of her films resurfaced. Younger generations watched Singin' in the Rain for the first time, now knowing the woman on screen had once buried a daughter and still smiled. Documentaries were re-aired. Bright Lights, in particular, took on new meaning. What once felt like a tribute became a farewell. Watching it posthumously was like being let into the living room of a family we all thought we knew and discovering the vulnerability beneath the glamour. In the months after their deaths, both Carrie and Debbie received posthumous awards and honors. But their greatest legacy wasn't in gold statues or box office numbers. It was in how they made people feel. Seen, heard, and unashamed to be broken. They were not perfect, but they were real. And in a town built on illusion, that was their greatest magic. In the end, this wasn't just the story of a famous daughter and her iconic mother. It was a portrait of how love survives, through pain, distance, and even death. Carrie Fisher lived a life that defied every expectation. Debbie Reynolds lived a life that embodied every expectation. Together, they danced between eras, from black and white musicals to intergalactic battles, yet their most powerful performance was the one they never rehearsed, loving each other, imperfectly and completely. They taught us that family isn't always neat or graceful or easy. But when the final light fades, what remains is the connection. Raw, resilient, and real. Perhaps you've lost someone and felt that same invisible string tug at your soul. Perhaps, like Carrie, you've had to make peace with your past. Or like Debbie, you've stood strong while everything around you broke. What do you carry from those who came before you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories behind the spotlight. Because every legacy begins with love.